Hi, my name is Maggie Seida, and I'm an undergraduate associate scholar at California State University, Monterey Bay. And today I'm going to be talking about a collaborative effort between the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary and the Ecosystem Electronics Lab. So I'm going to be presenting about bringing lights underwater for 3D modeling. So welcome to Monterey Bay. Monterey Bay is known as a really biodiverse hotspot, and we have a couple of things to thank for this. We have a lot of upwelling, and we have really high phytoplankton concentrations. This is wonderful for the food web. It's not so great anytime you're trying to collect media underwater. If that's photos or videos, we don't have the best visibility. And next, here we have the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. This stretches north, just north from San Francisco, all the way down to the Big Sur coastline, and is over 6,000 square miles of protected ocean. Within the sanctuary, there have been reported over 400 vessel losses, and these are considered culturally significant by the sanctuary. And one of the jobs of the sanctuary is to monitor these maritime heritage sites. Some of the vessel losses have a location and an identification associated with the ship. Some of them don't. So that's one of the jobs here. And these are at a variety of depths. Some are at diving depth, some are really deep, and we have this whole middle range in a couple hundred meters of depth. So previous work by the Ecosystem Electronics Lab has shown that taking ROVs to these sites and making 3D models with the ROVs is a really cost-effective and time-effective way to manage these sites. This is a Blue Rove 2. It's a consumer-grade ROV that we use in these sites. So how do we make the 3D models? We use something called structure from motion photogrammetry. And this is where you have the thing you want to model, and you go around it and take overlapping photos. In our case, we take video and we extract the photos, and we put these into a software called AgiSoft Metashape, which takes those overlapping points and stitches them together to create a 3D model. So going a bit further on this methodology, I'm asking, how does lighting affect model fidelity? And in this case, fidelity is the accuracy with which we can take what we see on the seafloor and recreate that in a 3D model. So as we go deeper in the ocean, it becomes darker and we lose color. In the shallows here, there's a lot of ambient light, and you can see a lot of true color. In mid-depth, we still have some light, but there's a lot more blues and greens. And then deep, it's dark, unless you bring your own light. And I really want to emphasize that this happens really fast in Monterey Bay because we have all that particulate matter in the water. So something you need to consider when you bring your own lights down is backscatter. And backscatter happens anytime you bring lights down in the water. They're going to reflect off the surface and cause for messy imagery, cluttered imagery. One thing that you can do to minimize this is to take the lights and move them away from the center of the camera axis to illuminate the object you're trying to take a photo or video of, and not all that water between you and the object. This comes with a balancing act. Anytime you have lights or external arms on a rover or camera, this is an entanglement hazard, a kelp, or even the wreck you're trying to monitor. And this also comes with more difficult maneuverability and piloting the rover with its currents of surge. So I'm going to briefly talk about our study site and then go on to how I put the right lights on the rovers, and we're going to take a look at some of the 3D models. So the Anchor Farm is a great place to do this because it's right offshore. It takes like 5 to 10 minutes to get there in a boat. And it's a maritime heritage site as designated by the Monterey Bay National Sanctuary. At this site, there are 4 anchors, and really not that much is known about them. We know approximately their location. We know the elements associated. Some of them have box chains, but we don't know the conditions of the anchors, and we also don't know much about the ecology that's growing on them. One is thought to be a pretty modern anchor dropped from a cruise ship, but other anchors that have been pulled up in Monterey Bay in the past have been from the time of Spanish colonization, like the 1700s. So having these accurate models with true color could really help us ID these anchors and get closer to identifying what's in this area. So to put lights on the ROV, I used 2 1500 lumen subsea LED lights, and I wired these into the housing, the waterproof housing on the ROV, and I also manufactured these brackets to attach them to arms, which are folded in there. And these arms have 2 different ball bearings on them, which provide multiple different angles for moving them further away from the road and getting different angle lightings on what we're modeling. This came when I was piloting it. Even when they were really reefed down, they would start moving. So the yellow wrenches that you might see in some of the photos, we 3D printed those to hold them in place while we're piloting. And then adding all this stuff to the rope made it much heavier and much more negatively buoyant. So a lot of time was spent in the pool putting these little buoys on the rope, which are white things right there, to keep that, to ballast the rope and get it neutrally buoyant. So next, and I really want to emphasize the cost efficiency part of this. This is not a big operation. This is all consumer grade material. So next we go out in the Zodiac. We have a Hummingbird GPS unit to locate those points. And here we have the Blue Rope 2. And I really want to give a big thank you to my mentor, Dr. Steve Moore. His patience for undergrads working in electronics near saltwater is just out of this world. Not only does he trust me with power tools, but he also trusts me with wire cutters, which are arguably the most powerful tool. So thank you, Steve. And then this is from Steve's point of view. That's me all bundled up. We have some wind in Monterey, but here you see the robe with those the arms, the brackets, and the lights and those buoys that I talked about. So let's look at some of the photos from a dive with the ROV at one of these anchors. The photo on the left here is a bit further away. The photo on the right is closer, and you can see some of that true color. There's backscatter in both of these. And while they provide a pretty good overview of the anchor, you're not really seeing it from more than one angle, and especially as we get further away, it's rather dark. And then this is a video taken with the robe. And again, notice that as you're further away from the robe, there's a lot less color. We get true color as we get in, and those lasers I will talk about later. But you can see quite a bit of backscatter there. Oh, nice. Next slide. Uh-oh. Oh, got it. We're about to get to the cool part. This is it. All right. Okay, oops, back one. All right, so next, from that video, that was put into as you saw from Metashape to make the 3D model. So this is an animation of the 3D model. In the software, you can actually drag it around and see it from multiple angles. But something that I really want to emphasize with this is that even when we're far away, one, we don't get the backscatter. This software is great at reducing backscatter, but you also get the true color, not just when you're really close up like this, but also when you're further away from that model. So it provides a really good detailed overview of the anchor that we weren't getting from the photo or the video. All right, I'm gonna try to do a better stuff. And then these are screenshots taken from the 3D model. These are not photographs. But with that true color and the detail of the model, we can actually identify some of the ecology on that anchor down to species level. So on the left here, we have strawberry sea anemones. In the middle, that yellow swirly thing right there is eggs, presumably laid by a nudibranch. And then on the right, we have Matridium, which are the fluffy anemones. So here's another model at the same site. We have the anchor, but then we have a block with chain. And this is good, you know, we can see some detail in the chain. But the first time I saw this model, I was like, oh, I must have forgotten to put the lights on the ROV because there is no true color in this. It is super blue. And I went back and I looked at the ROV video and the lights were on. And then I was really frustrated that this method wasn't working. I was like, well, this is my whole part of the project. The lights aren't working. But then I kind of took a step back and thought about it because really the purpose of this research is an evaluation of this technique for the sanctuary. And this model was taken midday, whereas the previous model, the anchor, was taken much later in the day, and there was a lot less ambient light. And so we use a GoPro mounted on the ROV, and the GoPro exposes for the greatest light source. So because this is a shallow site, a diveable site actually, we had all this light coming in, and the GoPro was exposing for that, so I lost the true color that was associated with the light that's been on the ROV. This is important to note because most of these maritime heritage sites are at depths where you're not going to get that light filtering in from the surface, so this wouldn't be a problem for deeper sites. I'm briefly going to talk about my colleague Ethan Switzer's work because it's a really important part of this project, and that's the issue of scale. Like I mentioned, we have the dimensions for a lot of these shipwrecks, but we don't always have the IDs of all these sites. So being able to scale these wrecks, we can help get closer to IDing some of the shipwrecks. So here we have a mooring block. How big does anyone think this is? Like a guess, how big do you think this block of concrete is? Like a meter? Yeah, well, actually, a meter is right on.
Oh.
I gave it away.
Same word standard.
Yes, I know. But if you didn't know it was a meter, it could be this big, it could be huge. So we need to create a scale. And how do we create a scale of our underwater? We do this with parallel lasers that are mounted on the ROV. And just briefly, the way parallel lasers work is that because they're parallel, at any distance where you shoot them on a flat object, they'll always be the same distance apart. So here we have two parallel lasers shooting from the ROV, and we can identify those as points. And then in AgiSoft Metashape, we know that they're exactly 16 centimeters apart. So we can create a scale, use the ruler tool, and then we know that that is 99.2 centimeters. That's a meter long block, which is right on par for the standard dimensions of mooring blocks in Monterey Bay. So then we can do the same thing with the anchor, and that's 2.5 meters is the width of that base. So that gets us closer to then being able to identify the anchor in the future other sites. And then going forward, a lot can be answered using this methodology. Particularly, I would be interested in looking at if different organisms grow on the wrecks, which would be considered artificial substrate, versus organisms that are growing on natural substrate right next to them, or considering if maybe the wrecks that have covered in this ecology, if they age faster than wrecks that don't have this associated ecology. And going back to the NOAA mission statement, and like Dr. John Armour talked about, a couple things that are really important that this technology can be used for is one, the communication of the science to others, and then also managing these sanctuaries and managing the heritage site and preserving those and learning more about them in there. And then also in the digital world, this is awesome. We'll send people on other coasts these models. We might be a ways off from the holodeck, but with VR, we totally have the capability right now to be able to project a life-size, true color, true scaled shipwreck or anchor and use VR headsets, and someone can take a tour around that site. So this can be used in education purposes at visitor centers and schools, and also in academia. You might have people who are super specialized in this field but can't get to that site, and now they can get to that site in a detail that you could really not even get with video or photo, but really unless you were right there. So we're bringing that up to the surface. And lastly, I would like to give a huge thanks to Erica Burton, my contact at the National Marine Sanctuary in Monterey, and my colleagues, Ethan Switzer, Ryan Solomar, and my mentor, Dr. Steve Moore. And a big thank you to CCB, because that was not possible without this program.
I didn't even do all that. but you are the last person, so you can ask her question. I guess you can just get one question and then you can entertain after. Anybody? Yes.
Do you use this to estimate biomass on those anchors?
Not yet. That's an exciting next step that I want to consider doing. And I've thought about, you might have suggestions for this, like doing that by pixel count or different approaches to not only seeing what is there, but how much of species there are.
Awesome.
Yes.
So I noticed in the photogrammetry model there were some shadows on the backside of the anchor. Have you thought about placing lights around the anchor that aren't attached to the ROV?
Yeah, and I know that in some large-scale underwater photography, they tend to do that. Working with a row and not divers, that might be a little bit more difficult, and it would really increase the piloting time and the risk of entanglement. But that could be something. I think my approach to getting rid of those shadows would be either to using brighter lights or just piloting the road closer. Really, in that model of the anchor, we focused on the base of it, getting really close there with the row. And so I would go again to that same site and pilot the row closer in all the areas, or maybe do it later in the day when those lights are going to make a bigger difference underwater.
Thank you so much.